And we are live. Welcome to the Contagious Thoughts Podcast, where dreamt realities are lived and like minded people share their thoughts. Why the name? Because thoughts filled with purpose are contagious. This is actually the first interview I ever recorded outside of an episode I did with my wife. This actually was recorded about a year ago when I was still kind of figuring out my flow and figuring out my equipment. But the conversation was so rich that I really wanted to share it with you guys. Our guest today is a guy by the name of Nick. And Nick is the kind of guy where he will take a deep conversation and just go even deeper. If we were to use an analogy of like peeling away layers of an onion, right? Like the average person I talk to day to day will peel back like 3 layers of the onion when like diving deeper into a topic, right? But Nick, this guy peels it all the way back like to the core, and he's not only able to get to the core or the root of something, but he also offers perspectives and insights that I didn't consider. And he's offering like deep, valuable insight. And he's the kind of guy where I feel like when he talks to regular people like me, I can tell he's holding back like 80% of the things that he could say for the sake of not confusing me or going over my head, you know? And most of all, not only is he a man who is full of perspective and insight, but he's a man that is full of love and compassion at the same time. He's actually helped me personally a ton. Just helped me to keep my perspective when I've gone through some pretty challenging transitions in my life. So he's a good friend of mine, and I'm really excited for you guys to listen to the show. And I hope that you take away as much as I did. So, without further ado, let's get into the show. So, I just wanted to set the stage of where we're entering into this conversation at. You're going to hear me read a quote from a Rocky movie. And the reason I'm reading this quote is that we can explore the question of why we do what we do by diving into some of the details of this quote that I thought could create some pretty interesting discussion. So here we go. This is from one of the Rocky movies, and here it goes. He says, come on, Adrian. It's true. I was nobody, but that doesn't matter either, you know? Because I was thinking, it really don't matter if I lose this fight. It really don't matter if this guy opens up my head either. Because all I want to do is go the distance. Nobody's ever gone the distance with Creed. And if I can go that distance, you see, and that bell rings and I'm still standing, I'm going to know for the first time in my life, see, that I weren't just another bum from the neighborhood. And every time I read that quote, I get like chills.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm the only one, but he's like, if I can go the distance, then I'll know I'm not a bum. And there's so much in this quote. So let's just dive in, man. But I guess I'm just, in general, from a high level, I'm curious on just what your thoughts are about this quote. And maybe a part two to that question is, can you relate to it?
Oh, wow. It's interesting because when you said the quote, I started envisioning the movie that I saw
Yeah.
when I was younger, and right when you got to the end, I actually got chills also. Um,
Mm.
and it,
Wow.
it, it is, and I think there's so much there, but I think the thing that struck me this time was this: I want to do what nobody else has done, and somehow that's giving me validity or proof of my value.
Interesting.
And so when I hear the question why we do what we do, I think it's a great question, and but I think like I tend to get interested more in the why don't we do what we want to do,
Mm.
because something is holding us
Yeah.
back if we're not doing certain things. Like, and I'm talking about like from a positive perspective. I want to do something great, but I don't do it. I want to be a certain way, and I don't do it. There's a
Yeah.
reason why I don't, and that question fascinates me. But yeah, like so I don't know. I mean, ask me something else to point me in a direction about that, because I'm got a lot of thoughts. Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I know you do, and funny enough, I know that you've been doing some thinking on that, like thinking on why people set out to do things and don't accomplish that. And funny enough, that's actually one of the questions I had toward the end to be like, it's like kind of going in a different direction, but I was like, even if we just take our, like we chat about that for 10 minutes, and I just take that and play it for the listener, like play that for the listeners, and do a separate episode off of that. I might even do that, but I am interested in your thoughts in that area. As far as the quote, what do you think that Rocky really meant by what he said?
I guess there is this thing in us where we have potential, but
Yeah.
sometimes I think we question, am I really good enough? Because and I think there's a part of us that thrives on competition, and but
Hmm.
I think that there's also a narrative that can be out there, and it's not always false either, whether it's in sports, athletics or whatever, of this is what it means to be successful, or this is what it means to have value. So he's in this realm of being a boxer, and there's this drive to want to not just be just average, and
Yeah.
possibly even in the rest of your life, you because life hands you these circumstances, you might even feel like, I'm nothing, I'm not good
Yeah.
at this, I don't do what I want to do here, but there's this one area that I'm good at, or this one area where I have the potential, and if I can succeed in this area, somehow it will validate the rest of me.
Hmm.
So there's probably even a history there of people basically telling them, you are a bum, you'll never amount to nothing. um,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I was talking with my son recently, and I kind of said to him, sometimes you're going to hear these thoughts in your head, and you're going to think that they're your thoughts, but it's almost kind of like there's like an invisible liar who's saying things. But if you don't
Yeah.
realize that this invisible liar is there, you're going to actually think it's you.
Interesting.
We have a hard time accepting ourselves for who we are, and in that probably forgiving ourselves. So we need something that we can point to give us proof that we have value.
Hmm.
And that's not everybody, but that's some people, and maybe even a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you said something that I find very interesting. You said something on the lines of, if I can prove myself in this area here, it will validate the rest of me. And that right there is so interesting to me. I'm really curious, why do we have this need or this desire to prove ourselves? Like, and I mean prove ourselves to the world, to other people, or even specific people, a specific group of people, but also prove ourselves, like, to ourselves, you
Yeah.
know? I mean, one, I'm curious if you can personally relate, but then two, why do we have this itch or this need or this drive to like prove ourselves?
I think we're conditioned to care about what other people think of us. We're
Yeah.
conditioned, and maybe there's even a need, right, to be part of any kind of social group, whether it's family or a neighborhood or whatever. But there's just this thing
I
inside of
agree.
us that we just care a lot about what people think. And you kind of said to me, like, why do we do what we do? And I was thinking about it, and I kind of felt like I can say a bunch of things and then maybe be more specific on one or something. But I think we
Yeah.
do things that we do because of fear.
Mm.
And sometimes we do what we do because of necessity.
Mm.
Approval was another one. Ability to accept ourselves.
Yeah.
And we also do what we do because of others' definition of what success is.
Ooh.
Okay. Then there's another side to it where we actually do what we do because we have a desire to accomplish something. And some of us, we do what we do because we love the challenge. It's good to have something to focus on. So it's not all
Yeah.
negative, but if it's
Right.
lopsided or disproportionate, it can become really detrimental rather than something that's really good for you. So, like, I know for me, I just was kind of always growing up like, well, listen, if you don't have a college degree, right, then you're
Mm,
not really a man. You know, you're not really
wow.
successful. And
Yeah.
I don't want to get into my life, but I got kind of kicked out of high school um, right at the end of my senior year and had to get my diploma elsewhere. And then I started college, and
Yeah.
then I just, did computer work, and then I just kind of stepped out from there, and I got certificates and not my degree. And for a long time, I kind of felt like it meant something less, like I was less than someone, until
Uh,
like I realized that my experience and the things that I learned in life, they were more valuable. Not that I shouldn't get a degree, but that they were just as valuable or even more valuable. And it's very funny because my father, in his life, is a pretty successful guy, and he never finished fifth grade growing up in Sicily after World War II because he had to go to work. But I think that there's just a lot
Sweet.
there. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but the other people's definition of success is a huge thing, and then I think fear, which I kind of think is another reason why we don't do what we do, right? Like,
Mm.
because even just today, we spent like an hour trying to fix a technical problem, right? So we should have been
Yeah.
in and out. And I think that the reality is much more difficult than the dream. The
Mm.
dream is, oh, I want to be successful. I want to accomplish this. The reality is there are challenges, there are problems, things don't go according to plan, and you need to learn and work through them. And it's very difficult. And I think that people that don't go through that experience of dealing with all the obstacles and challenges and learning from them and the setbacks, they don't grasp the same reward from accomplishment from people who have it more easy. But
Yeah.
that difficultness of having to regroup and deal with failure and say, okay, what am I going to do next? Like, it actually teaches us something. It gives us a different perspective on things that makes the next challenge seem doable. It changes the reality of
Okay.
what's possible once you accomplish something that was
Oof.
difficult.
That's man, that's crazy. So, what you mentioned about, what as far as like what drives us, what motivates us. Maybe we are in the driver's seat, but maybe there's some of these things that's the backseat driver, so to speak, or the passenger seat driver that's really driving us to do certain things or affecting how we do things or why we do things. And a few of those things that you mentioned, was fear for one. Fear is an excellent motivator. Excellent meaning, maybe excellent isn't the right word. I'm gonna say it's an effective motivator because I don't think it's always a good motivator, and I think that it can lead to different traumas and negative
Hmm.
experiences and negative effects, but it's an effective motivator, which is why I think so many people use it. And unfortunately, it's the only tool in some folks'
Yeah.
toolbox as far as how to motivate people to the detriment of those who are following them, so to speak. But it's so effective, and part of it is because it's like a survival mechanism in us. If I see a bus, I'm crossing the street and I drop my phone, I bend over to pick it up, and I see a bus coming at me, at 35 miles an hour or 40 miles an hour. If I had no fear in me, I'd be like, whatever. Let me just get my phone, take my time, and smack. There goes Darwin. Uh, and I don't want that, but I have this fear mechanism that's like, oh, like crap, get out the street, and it's like part of that's like survival. But I think that having the awareness of when fear is taking too much of a passenger seat driver, kind of taking over too much, and like what level of fear as far as motivation is actually healthy, but then there's a whole list that you mentioned, like approval. I think we could have a whole episode on just approval, you know. ability to accept ourselves, and then something that I think is pretty tied into approval, and it's others' definition of what success is. And I think that this is so interesting because when I think of myself and my desire to prove myself, and then sometimes I like imagine or I play out like my quote unquote success in my head. And it's interesting that there's always like a few reoccurring people that are in those
Hmm.
visions that I want to make sure see my success.
Huh?
you know? So I can't ignore the fact that my desire to prove myself, my desire to be successful is somehow connected to my desire for approval, but even, you know, someone else's definition or vision of what success is. Um, that is incredibly interesting. And I'll throw one more thing into the pot, and then I want your thoughts on this. So I think about our desire to prove ourselves, and I'll speak for myself. My desire to prove myself, my desire to feel valuable, to feel like I am something in the world. And maybe it's ego. I don't know what it is, but and I think about that and how it's connected to kind of like the finiteness of my
Right.
existence. Like I am not just like here forever, Like I have a beginning and an end. Um, you know, but I don't know if I am at peace with that. Like I don't know if I'm at peace with the fact that like yeah, like my life will end someday, like everyone else's. And there's something in me that like that's unsettling to exist and then just not exist.
Mhm.
And I'm not gonna get into religion and spiritual and the different beliefs of reincarnation versus do you go to heaven or hell versus do you just cease to exist. I'm not gonna get into all that. I'm not gonna go down the wormhole or the rabbit hole, but I just wonder if there's something, and let me know your thoughts on this, something like maybe inherent in us that just desires to I don't know, like I'm not gonna say like live forever, you know, but like the desire to have like think about this, like our like we want to build a legacy, like something that like lives on beyond us, like having kids, procreation, grandkids, passing down an inheritance, something that is living beyond us. And maybe that's kind of like this desire internally to kind of like exist after we no longer exist. Or to kind of go on forever or exist forever or live forever. And I don't know if that is just us wanting to, kind of tied to like why we want to like be a part of things that are bigger than us, like be a part of like a religion or faith or be a part of a movement. Like you get what I'm
Right.
saying? Like I'm curious if I'm curious like how that comes into play in this conversation as far as like what could potentially be driving us.
Wow. Okay. So much there. So I think there's a couple of things, and one of the things I was actually thinking about for the balance thing, and this is for the Rocky quote, which is very interesting. And to be honest, it's kind of difficult because we're having this very wide, ambiguous conversation of like, why do we do what we do, right? It's we haven't even nailed
Right.
it down to like, why does somebody start a charity organization, or why does somebody want an Olympic athlete
Right.
or a professional? Like, so I don't even know what we're just having this random conversation about stuff. But the thing about Rocky that's very, very interesting and maybe even very revealing is his goal in the conversation. He never says like, I want to be the champion, right? Which is a whole nother conversation. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, because if I'm an Olympic athlete, right, or if I'm training to be an athlete and I want to be the best version of me that I can possibly be, then my goal is I feel like, hey, I can get better. I can learn more. I can be more physically, uh, you know, obviously in shape. I can just be ready, body, mind, soul, spirit, and the best version of me. I think I can win this. But Rocky, there's like a humility in his thing, and maybe it's a sign of his lack of worth. But he doesn't say I want to
Mm,
be world champion. He just says I want to
mm,
go the distance.
mm.
That for me
Yeah.
is the accomplishment, to not quit, to stand up, hell or high water, whatever this man throws at me, even if he cracks my skull open, to not be knocked down. And maybe that is actually very revealing about his life. The character of the person in the story is, life has thrown me a bunch of stuff, but I'm not going to get knocked down. I'm not, and which is
Mm,
actually probably something we could all really benefit from, instead of, and I'm not saying we're not victims, because we are at times, but not holding on to the victim um, identity, not making that my identity,
yeah.
making that something that
Yeah.
happened, but that's not my identity. I'm not the It's not the victim is that my identity. It's the fact that I don't get knocked down. So I see that, and so
Mm,
I think that there is also like this contentment that's there. And sometimes
yeah.
ambition, if it's not balanced properly, like there's not a contentment of saying, hey, listen, I tried my best. I gave 100%. I can look myself in the mirror and feel like, hey, man, I really gave it my all, and this is what came of it. And that's enough for me. When it comes to like,
Mm,
I have to be the best, that can get tricky for some people, because you see people will like want to win at all costs, you know, and kind of cheat a little bit or whatever. I think that the balance is off. So I think that contentment is really important. Just to say, I want to be the best version of me that I can be. And then as a dad, I didn't create kids to live forever. Like, I create kids that want to be a dad, but
yeah.
I start to realize how dependent my wife and my kids are on me making better choices. And I never had this situation in my life where my actions impacted other people so intimately and so quickly. And now I have to look at that responsibility and say, okay, do I want to make these good choices because I love them, and want them to have the best environment to grow up in, rather than saying, like, oh, um, my kids are another badge of pride for me. My son has to be the best athlete. My daughter has to be the best, singer. Like, is it are they trophies? You know, like, in other words, like, at one point you're an athlete and you want to be the object of glory. At some point you have to retire and you want to be the coach. And I think the best
Mm,
coaches are the ones that don't want to be in the spotlight, but truly want to help each player be the best version of themselves they can be. I think there has to be a level of contentment. Ambition without some form of contentment can be very dangerous. And it may even be for the fact that, because then we can't accept life on life's terms.
mm. Wow. Ambition without contentment can be very dangerous. That is so interesting. And it actually it leads me to the question of like this whole thing of us, striving to feel, well, just striving, period. Striving and fighting, but underneath this kind of striving and fighting is this attempt, this strong push or attempt to feel valued, to feel or trying to validate our existence. Um I guess I'm my question is this good? Is this bad? Or is it something else? I try to not be I try to not think in such, like, dualistic terms, is it this or is it that? sometimes it's both, or sometimes it's something else. Yeah, I
I
mean,
think
yeah.
I think what's interesting when you said that is we step into someone else's category instead of like I've learned over the past 5 or 6 years to be much more of a yes and
Mhm.
person rather than a no but this or a yes but no to that, because I think it's all there, and I think there is a message that in the world there is a message in a lot of religions, at least in a lot of certain types of Christian religions, that basically says you're nothing, you're terrible, you're a sinner, and you're a mess, and the only thing that gives you
Mm.
value is because of this Jesus story, and he came down, he died on the cross for you. And I'm a big Bible guy. If you
Mhm.
know me, you know. And I love the concept of it all, and I think I really think it's a beautiful thing. But I think implementation of religion has been very detrimental because
Mm.
there is this lack of being able to accept the fact that just being human means I have good intentions, I have bad intentions. I have good intentions that I don't fulfill. I have bad intentions that I do, and then I have regret. And how do I
Yeah.
accept the reality of that being human is this, let alone with tragedy and everything else. So in a sense, I think the
Yeah.
concept of God for a lot of people, maybe when it first started out, could have even been just accepting reality. It's unpredictable. There's not really rhythm and rhyme. Bad people get away with things and good people don't. And I
Yes.
think the thing is I think we're not taught from a young age that our value does not come from our behavior and our success.
Mm.
And our value comes from the fact that we exist. Something
Mm.
created us. And we can have conversations about whatever that is, but something chose to
Sure.
create us and we're here. And that gives us all equal value. And you have
Mm.
value. And once that happens, then I don't need someone else's approval to give me value. When I do things that I don't want to do, I can feel like, hey, I can face myself, forgive myself, accept myself for who I am, and work on it. And
Yeah.
one of the things I think so we're operating inside of parameters that should not exist, and they create a very
Yeah.
slave. Um, I want to use that word carefully, like a mentality of we become a slave to being better, a slave to doing what's right, a
Yeah.
slave to approval, rather than being
Yeah.
able to just accept ourselves for who we are, but at the same time own our mistakes and doing
Yeah.
the hard part of doing some inner work and analyzing why don't I do what I want to do, or what is my real motivation for doing this. That's the hard work. But when you accept
Yeah.
that, you become free because I've owned it. If I said something to my kids, it's not just enough that I just go to say, I'm really sorry for saying that. Daddy's tone was wrong. I should not have said that. Sometimes I got to go back and get a piece of paper and start thinking, okay, well, why did I really say that? What was it? What motivated me to do that? And then look at myself and I might just be like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm afraid. Or oh my gosh, I'm just petty.
Mm.
Or oh man, I'm imitating this.
Yeah.
And that's why it's easier to get my value from approval and accomplishment than it is to do the inner work to face the bravery of facing myself and looking at my shortcomings and just saying, yes, that's what it means to be me. What it means to be me is
Mm.
this is where I fall short, and these are my strengths. And I
Mm.
can accept myself, right? Because when we think of love and we think of finding the perfect partner, if we're really honest, right? We always want to put our best foot forward when we're starting the day. We want to look well, we want to lose weight, dress nice. We want to do all that stuff because we want them to like us. Because and that's good, right? You should smell nice and stuff on a date, right? But like we want them because we're a little bit afraid that if they see the real us too early,
Mm.
that's gonna turn them off. But
Mm,
at some point,
it's real.
you want them to know the real you and be okay with not trying to, right? You hear this all the time, like relationships, like, and I'm not just saying it's just women because men can do this, is they want to change their partner. They're going to work on them. They want them to be different and all we want is someone to accept us for who we are. And I
Yeah.
think it starts with being able to accept ourselves for who we are. And that doesn't mean I
Mm,
give myself a
yeah.
free pass if I do something that's hurtful and destructive to somebody, but I can own it first and face it and then be like, all right, this is not who I want to be. So, like, I end up trying to change, not because someone else is telling me I have to, but I end up wanting to change because that's who I want to be.
Mm, wow.
No tangent. Sorry.
Yeah. All tangents welcome, man. All tangent. This is a
Okay.
tangent zone. All right. So tangents happen in
Okay.
this zone here. You know, and I mean, so our value comes from who we are as a human being, not from the things that we accomplish or the things that we do, but just who we are as a human being. Who we were, created to be, whether that be, you know, a spiritual being created us, or whether that be, you know, some cells split or whatever, and whatever you believe. I'm not
Right.
getting,
Right.
I'm
Right.
not, I'm
Exactly.
not going down the rabbit hole. But who we are, like, I think that we can agree on one thing, and that we are a part of the
Yeah.
human race, and we have value as human beings, simply as
Hmm.
people. But man, does our society teach us that our value comes from what we accomplish and what we do and what we build. And so I feel like that is enough for me to chew on. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this show. You may find it odd that I didn't thank Nick for being on the show, but I actually stopped the interview there because we actually go into a completely different topic. And that topic is going to be a completely separate episode that is going to be released on Patreon for the Contagious Collective members. And I do thank him for being on the show. And with that, let's now get into the no regrets segment of this show. So, before we get to the no regrets segment, just a couple of quick reminders. The first is stay tuned for next episode. Really excited about this one, and I'm always excited, but we're going to be diving into the question of what is holistic health? Starting and running a business in that industry. We have a special guest, a holistic Indra, and we're also going to throw a couple of questions in there that just continue this series of why we do what we do. Also, very proud to announce we have our Valentine's Day merch line up dropping soon. Please follow us on social media so you can stay tuned for when the official drop happens. Of course, the non Valentine's Day merch is already officially up and on sale. Please check out the website. It's a great support for the podcast. Also, this is your official invitation into the Contagious Collective. What is the Contagious Collective, might you ask? Well, this is a VIP Patreon group where you have access to exclusive content, insight into my personal journey as an entrepreneur and creative on a journey to make my own dreams a reality. We also give you access to a Discord community where you're able to ask questions to myself and some of the guests who have come through the podcast. I think I already mentioned you get access to exclusive content that's not released to the public that I find to be pretty entertaining, pretty valuable. Sometimes it's just behind the scenes bloopers. You get a glimpse of what happens behind the scenes in the making of some of the podcasts. So $5 a month and get you access to everything I just mentioned. And did I mention as well that it is a great support for the podcast? Please follow us on social media for any updates about new releases and upcoming collabs. And with that, let's continue to transition over to the no regrets segment of the show.
Come on, hey, it's my show. Hey,
The no regrets segment of the show is where myself and the guests have a chance to listen to the entire episode and answer the following questions. Number one, is there anything you said that you regret saying, even if it's how you said something? And number two, is there anything that you did not say that you wish you did say? With that, let's dive in. So, for me personally, I don't have any real regrets. I mean, aside from listening to this like a year later after I after I originally recorded it, I am listening back and I'm hearing how much I've grown over the last year, and how the way that I interview and the way that I go about asking questions and follow-up questions has changed. And so maybe there's some, I won't even call it a regret, because I'm really big on giving grace and giving respect to my past self, which means if I put my heart and effort into recording something a year ago, there's always going to be growth as long as I live. And I'm always going to be refining and getting better. So I have to respect the work that my past self did, and so I'm not gonna say it's a regret. Although listening to it, I definitely took away a couple things. I was like, I could have done that differently, or nitpicking my own stuff, as well as me learning my equipment and mic discipline and all that kind of stuff. So, um, mic discipline, for those who don't know, is just keeping the mic at a consistent distance from your mouth so that the audio is level. And I don't have an audio engineer, or a producer. I am my own producer and audio engineer, so it's something that really makes the finished product, just sound better for you guys. So for the listeners. So now, when it comes to the second question, as far as anything that I did not say that I wish I did say, there was one part of the show where I wish that I asked Nick another follow-up question to the question that I asked, and I felt like he might have misunderstood the question that I asked. I was asking a question about having kids to sort of leave a legacy that lives beyond your existence on this earth, and I think he took it as people having kids to like live forever, and it wasn't so much living forever, it was more so that your legacy would, in a sense, live forever. So, but I wish I would have just clarified the question, maybe asked it in a different way, that he could have understood where I was coming from, and given me an answer that was more specific to what I was trying to get at. So that's my only regret there, as far as what I did not say. And then for Nick, I asked him these questions, and he gave me some responses. So I'll read the responses that he gave. So to the first question, as far as anything that he regretted saying, he said not really, that he didn't really regret anything, but he said that there was a part of the show where he talked about a Rocky quote, and there was something along the lines of like "Come hell or high water, I won't get knocked down," and he just misspoke. He meant to say "Come hell or high water," like if he gets knocked down, that he won't stay down. So, in other words, if he gets knocked down, he'll get back up and keep fighting and whatnot. It's more of a perseverance. And the answer to number two, as far as anything that he didn't say and he wished he did say, he had a couple of additional thoughts, and I think you guys will appreciate this. So I'm gonna actually read this. I hate reading word for word and sounding robotic, but I'm gonna read this word for word so I don't misquote anything that he said. So he said, "Not really, but I guess one reason we do what we do is sometimes we feel destined for greatness, or destined for so much more than we currently are. And I'm not talking about fame and fortune. I mean, sometimes you just know. You just know, like, I have what it takes. I have something in me that I need to accomplish, something about me that I'm not only capable of, but possibly created for some greatness, meaning that there's something in you that you feel that's there, where you're like, man, I feel like I was created for this, or I was created to do something great. To leave this life with that piece of business unfinished is not only denying myself, but denying others and possibly the world of something that they need. So I felt like that was pretty profound. That might be a social media post, actually. I really appreciated that. But with that, hope you guys enjoyed the show, and I'll catch you guys next time.